The client at lunch said, "This is bad, this is bad, this is bad." And at the end of the lunch, this guy, a very mild-mannered Englishman, stands up and says, "David says, clients get the kind of advertising they deserve. As far as I'm concerned, you bastards haven't had advertising bad enough yet." You got to be prepared to fire bad clients, because if you have bad clients, you're going to lose good people. Let's say that again. If you had bad clients, you're going to lose good people. Good people will go to work on good clients, and they won't stay around and be bullied. They won't. They've got to feel good about what they're doing every day. Now, as I said, you got to be prepared to have a client who makes a good product. We had great debates as to whether we should accept cigarette advertising before the Surgeon General's report and then after the Surgeon General's report. We had no problem before, but afterwards, David wouldn't take cigarette advertising for years, but our English agency did, so we had a dilemma there. And eventually, we decided not to work for cigarette clients. You get some proprietary drug medicines and things like that are a little shaky, we found. As I say, you got to have people you want to work with, and you got to say we got to have a fair profit over time. My largest client before American Express was General Foods, and one day, my largest client, and one day the advertising manager came in and said, "We're going to have a new compensation system." And he went through it, and I said, "Well, Dave, if you want to do that, okay, but we can't live with that. We can't live with that. And if you are going to put that system in, I got to tell you, we won't work for that. And you got to make your decision. However, to be constructive, I'll give you a new compensation system that we will work with, which will have a fee, will have an incentive for us if we build your business to make a lot of money, and if we don't build your business, we'll make less. So we'll come up with a plan, but we're not going to accept your plan because we're going to make so little money we can't afford to service it well." So you got to be constructive, but you should not accept a client where you're going to lose money long term, or even make too little money. Otherwise, how are we going to pay you? Somebody else. Yes, Gabriel.
Yes, I want to know how many countries do you operate and how many buildings do you have?
Well, I'm not Ogilvy anymore. I left there when I left the agency in 1990, we were in 52 countries with 350 offices. We had 10 buildings in New York, and I consolidated. When the leases were all running out, I moved the agency to Worldwide Plaza on 8th Avenue, which was being built, and they've since moved to 11th Avenue because that was a 20-year lease, and it's run out. I understand they're in, I don't know how many countries they're in now, probably a couple of 150 countries. But we had, for example, when I was there, had a terrific agencies all over Asia. And we had two guys sitting in our Hong Kong office. There were no agencies in China, no US international agencies in China. We had two guys sitting in the Hong Kong office. They're our China department. And one day the manager said, "I'm going to send Tony Che and Alfred Ma to Beijing." I said, "That's probably a good idea, Harry. Let's do that." Well, those two guys sat in a hotel room in Beijing, first American agency in China. I think there are now 5 full-service offices in China, and I think he told me there are over 3,000 people, Ogilvy people in China in those 5 offices. So how do you decide where to grow? Which is really responds a little bit to your point. We used to look at what categories are growing. What product categories are growing? What businesses do we want to be in? You want to work for clients in growing categories. We decided before the telecommunications business was deregulated. It used to be a totally regulated business. And in the 80s, they deregulated it. So we said, we've got to get in that business. So we went after AT&T. And when they deregulated, we invested in learning about that business adding people, because we have to get in the telecommunications business, about which we knew nothing. So we brought in some consultants to teach us telecommunications. You decide which are the growing categories and which are the shrinking categories, and it's a strategy. You want to be important in important categories with important clients. You look at a category and say, do we have the right client in this category? I don't know if you're stuck with the product conflict rules, because we were. We could only work for one gasoline, one food company, one credit card company, and I suspect your business is totally different. But so we had to be very careful about which kind of clients we did. Did we want the winner in the category or the number 3 brand, if you can only work for one? So you start backwards and say, what products and services are growing? Who are the likely winners in that? How do we find somebody in that? How do we meet somebody in that area? How do we develop some expertise? So you work backwards.
How did you control all those overseas officers? And how did you make sure that they're all doing a great job and the clients are happy and all this?
That's a great question. It's the perfect question. We had 5 offices in the U.S., and we had 350 offices around the world. And I'll start with the end. I had a client walk into my office. He said, I just came back from your office in Thailand, in Bangkok, which was 100% staffed by Thais. He said, just like being in your office in New York. Training. We didn't send a lot of expatriates around the world. We hired foreign nationals who knew the country, knew the language, knew the culture, knew the business environment, and we brought them to regional training programs and international training programs, which, by the way, are cheap. It's the cost of an airfare and a hotel room. There's no other. And we, year after year after year, everybody absorbed the central idea of what we're trying to do. And so when they went back to their country, they had that idea. And by the way, this is what they would do. For example, we had a campaign for American Express for their emergency medical services that go with the American Express card. And there was a father and his daughter, and they were canoeing someplace, and she broke her arm. And this is in the commercial. And he puts his arm around her to comfort her until the ambulance comes. In Thailand, you don't do that. You don't put your arm around a woman. You pat her on the head like that. Well, an American wouldn't know that, but in Thailand, we didn't have to tell them. So we would judge the people, not just on the offices, not just about how much they made or didn't make. We looked at the financials a lot, but how much business do you have? How much local business do you have? How much international business do you have? Who are your successors? Are you developing people? Are you moving people into the training program? So we had all of these different measures to try to control it, and everybody operated as one, even if we didn't own the agency. Some countries, we didn't own the agency. They were a correspondent agency. We didn't own 51%. We said, look, if you're going to be part of the network, be part of the network. If you're not going to be part of the network, whether we own the thing or not doesn't make any difference. You're either going to play in the game or not play in the game. You either buy the bigger idea or you don't. And it worked.
Just a minute ago, you were talking about AT&T and going after certain clients. Could you talk about like putting together a package and some of the risk that's inherent in going after a new client where you're doing all this work beforehand and there's no guarantee that you're going to get that client?
There are no guarantees in new business. You make some bets. Come back again. You know, most of the business is going to come from current clients. And, well, I wrote a book, What Did I Do for AT&T? I found somebody who knew somebody at AT&T, and they were being deregulated, and they knew all about community relations and public relations, but they didn't know anything about advertising. So I had written a book on advertising. You can find it on my website. And they asked me if I would participate in their training programs. I said, sure. They said, what kind of a fee do you want? I said, I want you to pick me up with a car and a driver and bring me up to your training site and then bring me back. So for 2 years, I would go up there 3 or 4 times a year to their training program, and I'd show them how to do advertising, basic principles. And I kept on going to our board meetings saying, I don't know if anything's going to happen out of this. I'm going back every couple of months, and my fellow director said, keep doing it, keep doing it. So I did, and eventually, when they opened up a new part of the business, we were one of the 3 agencies allowed to compete, and we won it. Won a $100 million account, which at that time was still a pretty good deal. You have 2 parts of the cost. 3 parts. One is the peak time. How much time do you want to spend doing that? Well, you should spend a lot of time doing that. How much time do you want to spend on research to learn about that business? And then the presentation itself. In the advertising business, it can get pretty heady. You can end up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on new business presentations. There's no guarantee. You better make sure you have a good shot at it, and you make a judgment call each time. And if it isn't working, you better, before you spend it again, you better figure out what went wrong. I'll tell you, here's another new business principle. You don't win them all. And you get a telephone call, and the call goes like this. You did a great job. It was very close. It could have gone either way. But it was just a little edge. And most times you'd say, you know, well, thank you. And you go back and you tell your partner, say, well, we came very close. And they say, fine. No, and I say, no, I spent some money on this and some time on this. And I want to have a cup of coffee with you. I don't need more than that. I don't want to do it on the phone. I've got to come see you personally. You owe me a half hour. You got to say, no, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? Who won the account? What did they do right? What did they do? You learn, you do a debriefing in person, every time you lose a business. And you say, guess what? Now we're not going to make that mistake again, are we? We learned that certain people are good at new business and certain people weren't. We learned that other agencies were doing things. They say, hey, look, that's it. We should really look at that and study what they were doing. So you learn from your mistakes, and you don't keep making the same mistakes.
Sometimes for new business pitches, we have potential clients asking us to do free work, kind of creative concepts. You know, and on one hand, I think it'd be helpful because it shows we go above and beyond. But then on the other hand, we're just kind of taking a shot in the dark. So if we're wrong, we can lose it. So have you experienced that before at Ogilvy? And usually, what is your response? I mean, do you think it helps or doesn't? Or are you dependent on the client and project?
A good question. Speculative creative work. You'd rather not do it. And what we would do is we would always try to do a little research. Sometimes it was, as I say, just going out on the weekend, give everybody 10 questionnaires and go out to a supermarket this weekend and ask 10 people these questions. Do some research on our own. And then we come up with a strategy. We've looked at the category. We've done some reading in the category. We've gone to the library. We've gone online. And we think this is the right strategy for you. Now, you take it first step, second step. The third step, they have to then say, I think they can do the creative work, but they're not sure. So to do some kind of inexpensive creative work, to say, look, this is not our recommendation, but this gives you a sense of how we think and how we work. And we'll show you what we used to call tissue roughs or things like that. We didn't spend a lot of money on, some agencies make a whole mock commercial. I mean, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars if the account is worth a number of $1 million. But some speculative creative work, unfortunately, makes sense because it's very hard for people who aren't in the creative business, who aren't in your business, to understand what you do. And they can't visualize what it's going to look like. So you help them get a sense of this is what it might look like. We have to do a lot more analysis. And what it might look like, and you also get a sense of how we work. It's a sense of what the working relationship might be. So it does make sense in a limited way for a specific purpose.
I have two questions. First, something we've kind of wrestled with is single point of contact versus multiple point of contacts in communication with the client. I'm curious if Ogilvy, now we kind of do a combination of both. Did you guys have a firm policy about, firm single point of contact in client communication or multiple team members communicating?
Well, you certainly want to have the client feel he or she can call anybody in the agency. You don't want to have any artificial barriers. You don't want things. But they also want somebody they can talk to say, will you make sure that this goes to, you have to have somebody pulling it together. We had a particular problem because, remember, we had an advertising agency, a direct marketing agency, a public relations agency, a promotion agency, a graphics division, and to make the client deal with each one of those, you can deal with our direct marketing agency, but somebody's got to pull it together. So we had somebody doing that for each office, and we had somebody doing that for a client all over the world. So while we operated for many of these clients in 20, 30, and 40 countries, we had one person in the world who was called the Worldwide Management Supervisor, who was responsible for that client's business around the world. The quality of the business, the staffing of the business, the profitability of the business. So you got to have, at some point, the client looks and said, who do I call for this? You need a point of contact, and you, as a firm, need somebody you can point to say, why did we lose that account? You. Somebody's got to be responsible and accountable. So you got to be responsible for growing that account and not losing the account.
What was that person's title? Sorry to jump in.
Well, it's a worldwide management supervisor, but we had all kinds of titles. Titles are cheap.